today I'm here with Mike Vassolo. We're going to be talking about Kempo Karate as well as kind of some other general topics. And Mike is someone I've known for quite a few years. Mike and I met back in, I think it was 1984 when I started taking martial arts lessons with John McSweeny at his dojo in Elmhurst. So Mike, can you tell us what got you started in martial arts?
Well, back in the 70s, I started to notice that my brother-in-laws were all getting fat. And I said, I got to find things that I can do every day to work out so that I don't become that way. And I tried running and stuff, but it hurt my lower back. So I started in the martial arts at the Y in Elmhurst. And little kids laughed at me for the whole first year.
Wow.
Because I was really clumsy, and I laughed at myself because I was really clumsy. But I knew if I stuck with it, it would be okay. And then I went to Olympic Karate, which was on North Avenue in North Lake. And I stayed there long enough to get a brown belt, but it didn't really resonate with me. The style was Goju Shirei, sort of a hybrid style of a couple of classic Japanese schools. And I learned pretty well there, but didn't excite me. And then I was going through the Elmhurst Press one day and I saw this thing and it said, learn how to fight like 007. I wish I had that ad. And I said, I wonder who this guy is. It was just a little quarter-page ad. So I went down into the basement where his school was, and he showed me a chop against that really took that heavy bag and creased it. And I said, geez, that's a lot more powerful than the chops that I was taught. Because I was taught linear stuff, and he was in circles. So I became convinced, and I started taking lessons. Now, he didn't have any belts at the time, and he said, you're a brown belt, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You just come on in. And over the next couple of years, I went up through the ranks because we talked them into having belts just to make it more attractive to target market.
People really seem to want belts.
They want belts. They want to see themselves going toward a goal. So I became a black belt in, 1982.
Okay.
May 18th, 1982 was my first degree black belt. And then, I was his head instructor for over 25 years, so I rose through the ranks and became a 7th degree black belt eventually. And I found it to be a very rewarding time, and I prided myself on the fact that as his head instructor, very few people ever got any kind of injuries at all.
Yeah.
Most of them happened during black belt testing or other testing. A girl broke her wrist trying to break wood. That's when we finally did away with the breaking wood thing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Nobody's attacked by boards. Just leave it alone. We understand the concept, but you don't need it. There were a couple other injuries, mostly related to board breaking. Really.
Okay.
And we tried to make it a humane school, which really is kind of weird because all of the techniques that we taught were maiming techniques or deadly techniques, basically. It wasn't a fool around, exhibition sport like Taekwondo. And, it's the most efficient form of self-defense that I can imagine.
Speaking of injuries, there was a story that personally I remember being down there. So I was one of the first younger students, I believe, in the school. So when I came down there with my dad, and we met with John, and John explained his school. He was very passionate about what he's talking about, and I was very interested. I hadn't been to any other schools, and this seemed like it fit with what I was looking for. And he said, I think you're mature enough, so I'll be happy to take you on as a student. And so started taking classes, but I know you were teaching the sparring part of it because John didn't really believe in sparring at all as a sport aspect of it. So I just remember one time we were down sparring, and I was moving in for an attack, and you hit me with a spinning back fist because I was not paying attention. I walked into it, and I ended up getting hit in the glasses, and I got cut under my eye. And I just remember John coming over and making sure I was okay, and then saying, please ask your mother not to sue me. And I said, don't worry about it, John. I'll talk to her. As mothers are, she was very unhappy, but I'm like, these things happen. That was, I think, the worst injury I ever got down there, and that was my own fault. So I learned a lesson that day.
Well, I had pretty good control and focus, but I always told people, I'm looking at that target where it is in this moment.
Yeah.
And if you move it toward me,
absolutely,
then you'll learn to be a little more careful in the future.
And I think I learned that lesson that day very well. So,
well, he wouldn't you know, he asked me to take over sparring because, as you said, he didn't really find much use for it. But I thought there was a lot of use for it because you got to learn how to size up opponents, move with them, learn how to close distance or get away. And you don't do that when you're just doing rote techniques in a line. You've got to have something that is like sparring. So I used to teach sparring from 7 to 10 on Mondays, and then fill in here and there where he would ask me to do that. But so I learned to pace myself because 3 hours is a long time.
It is, absolutely.
And even if the people are beginners, and beginners are actually the most dangerous ones because they have no focus, no control. So you're more likely to get hit by them than you are to hit them.
Right. No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So at the school, there was yourself and the other instructors. I know it was Tom Saviano and Ray Corda, and there was another gentleman. I can't remember his name. Steve. He was a shooter.
Yeah, Steve. I don't remember his name, but I can see his face clearly. He wasn't an instructor of sorts.
Okay.
But John, he resonated with John because he was into guns.
Okay.
He was really into guns, and he had a collection, I guess.
Okay.
And the main instructors, you know, I did sparring basically. Tom did multiple man self-defense.
Okay.
And Ray did things like women's self-defense and Tai Chi, stuff like that. And then Ray wasn't there a lot of the time. He would come once in a while. Tom was there, but then he broke off and got his own school rather quickly.
Okay. Huh. So part of what I thought was interesting about the way John taught his class was he had basically this list of 23 techniques, and that he said that his system was basically just these 23 techniques. And once you learn that, was his whole system, which I found to be pretty simple and straightforward. So can you tell me a little bit about how this was developed?
Well, you know, I helped John put that together because I'm a writer by trade, and you know, he wanted it to be clear and concise. And basically I just said, let's just enumerate them one after the other. I didn't know there were going to be 20 whatever.
Okay.
And he said, well, here's, you know, one technique, and then he'd work it through, and I just put it in words.
Okay.
Okay. And eventually that was that became what we used to develop katas through the year. So we had one long form that was all those techniques put together.
Okay.
And then we split it up into 3 shorter forms for beginner type students.
Okay.
You know? And that's when I started to shed a lot of techniques, because in becoming a brown belt in Japanese karate, you know, they have to have new techniques for every level.
Right.
And you get this glut of stuff that is just not practical for self-defense. And by going through this with John, I saw that simpler was better, and I started to throw out a lot of stuff. And I've even taken that for my own personal use and pared it down.
Okay.
As I've gotten older, because I can't kick over my head anymore.
Yeah.
You know? And so I've pared it down to what I think are the essential, how do I save my life techniques.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I agree with that approach because I think it works best for most people, simple and easy and effective. I also like this because the names of the techniques are not something fancy or esoteric like snapping twigs or you know, gathering storm. People know what it is. It's a front choke. Well, okay, I know how to defend against a front choke. To me, again, it's more that directness. You know, how can you get to the point right away? So.
Well, John was powerful and direct, as you know.
Yes.
And you wouldn't mess with the guy, because even if you could beat him up, he'd come back and shoot you.
Well, that's true.
So, you know, you just, there's really no winning.
So John became one of the first black belts in Ed Parker's form of Kempo. How was Ed Parker's Kempo and John's different from your perspective?
You know, I bought all of Ed Parker's books.
Okay.
And I've got, when he would come into town and we'd have lunch with him, I'd get him to autograph them and stuff like that. And I studied those books, and he did have the goofy names attached to the techniques. And there were a lot of flowery techniques in there, but again, he was a simple, direct guy too. His real power was just, he'd get right in your face and crush you. And so I think he just had all those other techniques because he had to keep attracting students to the school and keep building them up, you know. And I've got a picture of Elvis's 7th degree black belt from Parker, as a matter of fact. And if you watch Elvis do kata, he was pretty good at kata. I don't know what kind of fighter he was, but he did katas really well. As far as those techniques go, if you learn just a handful of those, the most practical ones, you're probably going to be able to get yourself out of most scrapes.